If your only choice is that you have to over-vaccinate your dog to get him groomed, or you buy a clipper and you have lopsided ears every time.
And she went, oh. Yeah, I mean, you could
you're
just,
one of
the
those.
smell on the upper lip, like, oh. If we find external parasites on your pet, they will be treated while they are here. I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, your pet's advocate. My guest today, Carrie Hyde, is well versed in a lot of areas of pet care. She has a company called The Spa in Southern California. Tell us exactly what you do at The Spa.
So the spa is all-encompassing wellness, but we do grooming, we do boarding, we do daycare, we have a veterinary clinic. Nutrition is probably that's the thing that I'm most passionate about because I think everything starts with nutrition. But we do boarding, small dogs, we do grooming. We're pretty big. We've got pretty big
Which is very cool. So you have a long history of dealing with a lot of animals coming in and out your door, both dogs and cats. And so one of the things I get questioned about very often from pet owners is, what are the requirements to have your pet go to boarding, grooming, daycare? And we actually did a focus for 1 month on dogs and group play. So talking about
very cool
daycare, that sort of thing, and dog parks. Dog parks have been something that most veterinarians have been against for a very long time, and I was against them as well. And that is because most of the dog parks that I have seen over the years are very poor quality, poorly run. They literally are just a place for dogs to go get hurt and pick up diseases because they're not clean, they're not well taken care of. And then I met John Sarver, who owns Gyms for Dogs, and he is just a huge advocate for high quality spaces for dogs and group play. I started talking to him and then started thinking back when my daughter Gwen moved to Raleigh. She lived in an apartment, and then silly her, she went out and adopted an 80-pound dog. And so taking that 80-pound dog for a walk on a leash a couple times a day when you live in an apartment complex is not enough. It's not enough activity. It's not enough interaction. And so there was a very small dog park on the grounds of her apartment building, but it literally was the really icky, awful dog park that we think so much about, which is a chain link fence in a field with nothing. And so that is not a good setup for group play. It's not a good setup for any kind of play. And so when we started looking at this, we visited a couple of really high-end dog facilities where it was, boarding, grooming, daycare, top of the line play spaces for these dogs, pools and fountains and play equipment. But what was really interesting, one of the ones that we went to fairly locally here, we asked what their requirements were. And John had his dog with him, and John is very, very holistic with his dog. So he has titers run instead of giving vaccines automatically. And he uses natural flea and tick prevention. And so we were going literally to do filming and an interview. And we said, hey, John's going to have his dog with him. Can Maggie come for the day while we're doing our filming? They wanted proof that John's dog was up to date on a long list of vaccinations and that John's dog had been given chemical flea and tick prevention in order for that dog to be with John. Now, this dog goes to dog parks and group play experiences all over the country because wherever John is, his dog goes, and she goes in all these settings.
Yeah.
And they said no, even though he got a letter from his veterinarian showing the titers, proving that she, was on natural flea and tick prevention. And they said that was not enough for the dog to be admitted to be on that campus. And we went and toured, and it's a beautiful facility. Like, the dogs are playing beautifully. The people that are watching over the group play are very, very good about making sure interactions are appropriate, nobody's getting hurt. And they have a very good high record of Dog's not getting hurt, dog's not getting sick. I know that every state has different requirements for boarding, grooming, daycare facilities for pets to be admitted. You're in California. What are the requirements for dogs and cats to go to those sorts of facilities in California?
There's a difference. So there's requirements by law, and then there's policy.
Right.
So a lot of times people confuse those, which is why I want to make sure your listeners understand. Just because a facility says that they require it does not mean that the law requires it. And sometimes boarding facilities owners don't even know their own laws. They just get a kennel license, they sign it, they don't even know what is required by law. In the state of California, it's very interesting. So in California, we are required to have the rabies vaccine. We can't take titers. We also are required for leptospirosis. And are you listening? I can get a piece of paper from the owner saying that the dog got his distemper parvo shot. So I don't need anything from a veterinarian saying that the owner can just
sign
write
off
out
and say,
that
yep,
I have a
up to
distemper
date.
parvo. Yeah. So we could just do it that way.
But are distemper and parvo a requirement?
Kind of loosely. Like when I've talked to them, they kind of say, well, if you don't want to get the distemper parvo, you can just have the owner sign that they got it. And I'm like, oh, so you want me to lie? Like we really
You just told me to lie.
You just told me to lie. Okay.
enough.
I don't know if so it's interesting. You got to know that the kennel is requiring the policy, or whether they have their policy or if it's the law wherever you are. Some of them are requiring distemper, parvo, lepto, coronavirus. After the pandemic,
Ridiculous.
Vets that weren't giving the coronavirus for the last 15, 20 years started suddenly giving all the coronavirus, which isn't the same thing.
Yeah, totally
It's
not
totally
even related.
Not the same
Totally
thing.
not
So
related.
when you're going somewhere, most boarding facilities don't even know what the coronavirus is. And here's the thing. Most boarding facilities are only interested in not getting sued. That is not why they're requiring these vaccines. They just think they're protecting themselves by saying, well, we had everybody vaccinated, so if your dog got kennel cough, it's not our fault because we had everybody vaccinated. When I left the vet world, which was in 1999, 2000 is when I left, and I opened up the spa, I was having a lot of kennel cough coming through my facility. If we'd have a big weekend when we'd have a lot of dogs, we would get calls and they would get kennel cough. And I'm like, I don't understand. Because back then, mind you, I was a vet tech from a very conventional vet. I was making everybody get vaccinated, but they were still getting it. And so I ended up calling Dr. Jean Dodds, speaking with her. She happens to be in my backyard. She answered the phone, lovely. And I said, I don't understand. I'm making all these dogs get the kennel cough vaccine and they're all getting kennel cough and I don't know what to do. And she says, well, do you have a waiting period? And I didn't have a waiting period. And she also said that vaccine doesn't really work. So,
well, the vaccine back then protected against 2 strains of kennel cough. Now it protects against 4, but there's like 60.
Right.
So
yeah,
pick one.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I didn't have that waiting period. So Dr. Dodds had explained to me about the shedding of that virus. She said that parvo is also another highly shedding vaccine and that she had done some studies on parvo dogs that they took a litter of puppies, vaccinated one, and then all of them titered for having parvo from that vaccine. So she said those 2 vaccines shed quite a bit. So what that made me do was come up with this waiting period because it was really hard, even though the state of California doesn't really make me make a dog get parvo vaccine, to tell a client not to do that when I'm not a veterinarian, when the veterinarian is telling them to do that was really difficult. So what I decided to do was go more along the lines of, I'm not going to make you get a vaccine that I don't have to require you to get by law, but I am going to make you wait 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I am absolutely not bringing parvo in here. I'm not bringing kennel cough in here. And what that did was kind of sparked the conversation where people were like, well, why do I have to wait the 2 weeks? Well, that went on for years and years where I fought and fought and fought and fought. And then the COVID happened. And suddenly people were learning about the waiting period of your own vaccine. And so that has changed a lot for me now. People they know they have to wait 2 weeks before they come. The only vaccine, if somebody forgot, I'll let them do is the rabies if they got that because it's a killed virus. So it's not going to shed. Right. So I will let them. But that's still, I always tell them, listen, if you're going to vaccinate your dog right before you go into a stressful environment, and I don't care how lovely the place is, I don't care if it's the cleanest, nicest, greatest people, it is not home. It is not home. It causes stress on your animal. And when your animal's stressed, they use up a lot of their cortisol, which then uses up their vitamin C because you need vitamin C in order to produce your cortisol. So now your dog has got low vitamin C, high cortisol, and then he goes home sick. Why? Because you vaccinated him. So we have a very strict rule on the 2-week period of waiting.
Which is so good. And when the very first practice, second practice I worked at, and then when I owned my own clinic, we were very close to boarding facilities, high volume boarding facilities. For so many years, because we were the closest clinic, people wanted to, I'm leaving tomorrow. I got to drop my dog off at the boarding kennel. They get to the boarding kennel and they're not up to date on vaccines. And so they turn around and drive back up the road and come, knock on our door and say, hey, I got to get my dog in for boarding. Can you vaccinate him right now? Because I got to leave in an hour and I got to drop the dog off. And so we did that for a very long time. And again, absolute wrong time to vaccinate them. And we're giving them kennel cough and then they're going and shedding it there. We're giving them parvo, they're going and shedding it there and infecting everybody else around them. So they're either vaccinating everybody or making everybody sick. Take your pick. Yeah. And then we kind of started to learn, like, oh no, you really need to give this ahead of time. Like, we don't want these animals getting this and coming right in. Then we were kind of stuck in the middle with people who show up at boarding and they're leaving on vacation. Their plane is first thing in the morning. It's Friday afternoon and they're standing on our doorstep and we're like, well, we can't because they're not going to let you in even if you get it right now because they have a 2-week waiting period and we're telling you you need to wait the 2 weeks as well. It didn't go over well with the clients because the clients, it's their fault because they weren't prepared. But you know what? It's also the kennel's fault for not saying to them, and all vaccines must be up to date and you must have gotten them at least 2 weeks before you're going to drop your animal off. It did get better over the years because they started educating people more and we started educating people more, but it's become a really big problem. When I was up for Woman of the Year in the pet industry, we had all the women who were up for awards. And so there were, 30 or 40 of us there. We were all the finalists. And I was sitting next to a girl who owned a couple of boarding facilities in New York City. So here I am, the holistic veterinarian, and here's somebody who owns boarding and grooming facilities in New York City. So, we're introducing ourselves and chit-chatting before the program started. I turned around to her and introduced myself and I said, yeah, and I'm all for minimizing vaccines and blah, 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 my usual shtick. And she went, oh, yeah. I mean, you could just, the smell on the upper lip, like, oh, it's just so not happy with me. And I said, well, what vaccines, or what do you require? Now, this was before we had all these new bigger and better flea and tick medications, although they were just kind of starting then. And she said, oh, well, we require that all dogs coming in have DHLPP, corona, kennel cough, rabies, Lyme, like the whole litany, like you know, like every vaccine. And I went, oh my gosh, why do you require all of that to come in for boarding? I mean, do you have a high tick population in your kennel?
Right.
Like, why would they need a Lyme vaccine to come into your kennel? She looked at me and she said, well, that is New York City law. And I went, really? Like, it may or may not be. I have no idea. But I was so flabbergasted by it that I kind of went, yeah, I don't think we have anything to talk about. I was just like, can I change seats? It just blew me away. And so now, like this beautiful facility that we went and looked at, not only do they require all of that, but they also require that you are using a chemical flea and tick treatment, because we can't call them preventatives because a lot of these do not prevent fleas and ticks from getting on your dogs. They only kill them after they get on your dogs or cats. For me, I mean, I get it. They don't want to get a flea infestation in their kennel. I get it. But if a pet comes in, and this also happens at a lot of vet clinics where everybody should check when you sign the release form. Let's say you're dropping your animal off for a dental procedure or for a spay or neuter or a mass removal. Read that entire form and we even had it on our forms at our clinic. It says on there, if we find external parasites, aka fleas, ticks, lice, whatever, on your pet, they will be treated while they are here. Because I remember we had somebody drop off a dog that had died at home. They brought it in for cremation. And so we said, okay, fine, and they brought the dog in, wrapped in a blanket, brought it into our back room, laid it on the table. And we said, okay, we'll take care of it. We got them all checked out. They left. My technicians opened the blanket. Literally thousands of fleas were flying through the air. This animal was so infested. Our whole clinic was awful. So they immediately wrapped the dog back up, ran it out in our backyard, laid it down in our little fenced backyard and said, okay, we're going to have to take care of this dog outside. Our clinic got infested. Our backyard got infested. We had an exterminator that came monthly to the clinic to do around the outside of the building. And we had to have him come every day for weeks to get rid of the flea problem in our like we could not we couldn't walk dogs out there. Wow. It was awful.
Yeah.
And we actually had to shut down the clinic, move our clinic cats out, set off chemical bombs in the clinic to get rid of the fleas, which I'm so against that, but we got so infested. So I get it. Like nobody wants that to happen. When you are signing that release form for your pet to be admitted, when I sign my animals in for their dentals or whatever they're getting, if that is on there, I cross it out. And I say, if you find any parasites on my pet, call me. Here's my number and I will get it taken care of. Like I will bring you what I want
What's going
used.
on, my dog?
In our clinic, we had that on there, but then they'd get sprayed with an essential oil spray. Yeah. We weren't going to put a chemical on them. We were absolutely going to spray them with an essential oil spray, something natural. So be very careful and always read the fine print. And if you're taking your dogs for boarding, grooming, daycare, find out what those requirements are. So when we adopted Charlie, our Cocker Spaniel, sadly, he came through a shelter. He was a stray and he came through a shelter up in Long Island. And so when they got him, they gave him every vaccine. They gave him Bravecto. They gave him HeartGuard. You know, the poor guy just got inundated with everything.
Yeah.
And so when we adopted him, he had all this stuff. And he's an older dog. So of course, because he was a stray, they had to count it as a 1-year rabies. Well, he came in groomed. So I mean, clearly he's had vaccines before. So I guarantee that was a 3-year rabies.
Sure.
So we started taking him to the groomer down here because he came with all kinds of allergies. I wanted a microbubble bath. So we found a groomer, of course, an hour away for him to go get his microbubble baths. Well, after a year taking care of him for us, they sent me a reminder and said, Charlie's rabies vaccine is now overdue and he needs to have boosters in order to come back and be groomed. And that was the last straw. And that's the last time he got groomed by them. And now I do his grooming. And, you know, I cannot say that he looks like he's done by a professional groomer, but I really don't care. He doesn't go anywhere. He's not a show dog. But I'm not going to give him a vaccine that I know that he doesn't need. It does create a huge problem. For a lot of people. If you cannot get your vet to write an exemption, if you cannot groom the dog yourself, it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem for someone like myself that owns a boarding facility. There were times when I have thought, if I'm going to have to force these vaccines on these animals, I don't want to run a boarding facility because I don't want to be creating an environment that has to do this. So one of the things we've done is, especially now that we have veterinary there, is we are doing thimerosal-free rabies. So that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. We're doing Thuya after. We're making sure we're not giving that rabies vaccine to an animal who is unhealthy, including an ear infection. So we're making sure that, so I have some control over that now, which has been great, where I can say, you know, I would really appreciate it if you'd see our vet because we're making sure we're not doing that stuff. Flea and tick stuff is, I always tell people this right off the bat. I had a dog die from flea and tick medication. So if you think that I'm going to run a facility that is requiring someone to put flea and tick medication on your dog, there's no way that's going to happen. Now that requires me to do a lot of other steps to make sure that I don't have, as you're saying, completely infested facility, right?
Sure.
I can't have that. So one thing I will say, and people are going to probably be shocked, I would not take my dog to any facility that is allowing people to put this stuff on the back. And here's why. Your dog is going to be playing with other dogs. And if he gets that in his eye, you are going to have a huge problem. That is an oil-based thing, and it gets all down the back of other dogs. And then they chew on each other, they rub their faces on each other, and they can get it in their eye. So if somebody comes to me and we see that little mark of the devil, I'll call it, and I think that's fair for me to say that since I had a dog die from it, that dog's going straight in the bath. It can't even go on my floor if it's had that stuff put on him. Now, if somebody's giving them a pill, they are not allowed to give it to them within 48 hours of coming to me. We had a dog, it was a little Yorkie years ago, and they brought the dog in, and we don't give it. I remember people would say, well, she's going to be here past the 1st of the month, and she has to have it on the 1st of the month, and here's her pill. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not giving that to your dog. There's no way. So we had this lady give the pill to her dog in the parking lot. It was a little Yorkie. She gave him the little pill, little flea pill, and then brought him in. At 1:30 in the morning, that dog went into a massive seizure. So my night shift called me. I rushed down to the emergency clinic. We tried to get a hold of the owner. I did finally get a hold of her. I asked her, did you give her any medications? I didn't even say flea stuff. I just need to know if you gave her anything in the last 24 hours. And she says, well, I gave her the flea pill in the parking lot right before I dropped her off. So I told the emergency room vet this, and before I even got the words out, he said, no, it's not the flea stuff. It doesn't cause seizures. Of course, I'm like,
Even though it's
okay.
on the label, but
Right. But what was really, really crazy about this is that dog was at that emergency room with that veterinarian exactly 30 days before.
with the same problem.
Same problem. So when I got all that information from the mom, I said, you need to investigate this. That dog spent 2 nights in the hospital while they tried to figure out what caused those seizures, never could figure it out, sent her home with no information. So the very next month, she gives her the flea medication on the first of the month and has a seizure. And so I tell her this over the phone. I said, you really need to start investigating this. This is why I won't give this medication. And she went back to him with that saying, hey, she was just here. Same thing. Here's my calendar. I gave her the medication. They still denied it, that it doesn't cause seizures. So I absolutely won't. So what do I do? Right? Like if I won't let you in my shop if your dog has any of that liquid on them. I require 48 hours before you bring, but I can't guarantee they're doing that. You could give it in the parking lot for all I know, right? Like I don't know what you're doing. I hope that you're waiting 48 hours. And the reason why the 48 hours, so if you are one of those people that is still giving that, then you haven't been listening to Dr. Judy for very long. But if you are still giving it, don't give it right before you go into a stressful environment with your dog. We only do small dogs and we only board 25 dogs a night. Like we're not a big stressful environment. I have a night shift where they're 24 hours. We have it set up like a home environment, but dogs are still away from their home.
Oh yeah.
They're
it's still stressful.
Not cuddling with their mom. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have someone in your home, away from your home, they're not mom. They're not dad. So don't give that stuff. What we do, first off, we check every single dog that comes through our facility. And what's really unique about how ours is set up is our bathing area. Your dog can't make it to our daycare room without getting through our bathing area. So we check every single dog before they go back there. I may not see the flea, but I will see the flea dirt. I will see the flea debris. And if we see any flea debris, they go straight into the tub. Secondly, we extract everything out every day. So our laundry is washed constantly every single day. And then we use like a shop vac. So we're actually extracting. We're not just using a mop. A lot of boarding facilities will just use a mop on the floor, which isn't doing anything. So we'll do that. We also bathe their dogs before they go home if they've been there for 3 days. So I'll check them to make sure they're not going home. And just in case, you just never know. It is difficult, but it's a choice that I would rather have one flea on a dog than using it. It's just how I believe it. And we have never had a flea infestation. So knock on 25 years, we've not had a flea infestation at the spa. But we check everybody before they come in.
Yeah.
It's not very convenient when your dog is being rushed to the hospital for seizures. So
nope, not convenient at all.
And that's what flea and tick medication is convenience. It's just convenience. That topical stuff, if your dogs are going to a place that is allowing that topical stuff, just know that your dog is probably rubbing his face all up against that toxic stuff.
Well, there was a great study, which you may have heard about, where they took 3 dogs. One was given no flea or tick medication, one was given an oral pill, and one had topical applied. And they put the 3 dogs in a waiting pool together for 3 minutes. And then they tested all 3 dogs, and all 3 dogs had both chemicals in them, both the oral and the topical, just from being in a little waiting pool together for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So when your dog is in, and same with cats. So if we were to treat one pet in a household, they're all basically being exposed to it. It doesn't, it's not like you put this stuff on and it stays in that one little spot, or it only affects that one animal, especially with small children in the house.
It's
and
awful.
The hugging and the kissing and the petting and the fingers. I mean, there's great studies. We know that the waterways of Europe are highly contaminated with fipronil, which is flea and tick preventative.
The bird stuff, the bird nests now, they're finding it because they're using dog
bird
hair.
nest material, and they're finding it in high quantities in the hair of children in France. So there's all these studies out there to show us that, all these chemicals that we're using because we're scared to death that we might ever see a flea or a tick.
God forbid we see a flea.
God forbid. All these chemicals that we're using, that they're affecting our environment. They're affecting, and a lot of these are highly toxic to plants and animals in our waterways. Yet we're finding all of this in the waterways. So anyway, all this to be said, if you go to boarding, grooming, daycare facilities, even some veterinary facilities, if your animal's going to be hospitalized, they are requiring a certain list of vaccines or a certain, flea or tick treatment. If you travel with your pets, some countries, in order to get into the country, your pet may have to be dewormed. Your pet may have to be treated with a flea or tick chemical. You have to decide, is it more important for me to be able to travel with this pet? Could I find something else. We have house sitters. Frankly, now that we live in North Carolina, we have one house sitter who comes from New Jersey. Well, she loves the farm, but it's not cheap. It's not a cheap way to do that, to pay for somebody to fly or drive from 4 states away to come stay at my house and take care of, now we're over 100 animals, so I think I'm going to have to up her rates. It means that my animals get to stay in their home environment.
Yeah.
It's not with mom. Luckily, we have my mom who lives with us.
That's perfect.
And
Yeah.
our dogs are so crazy that when we go away, if my mom is taking care of them, she moves from her bedroom to our bedroom.
Oh, that's
sleeps
awesome.
in our bed so that the dogs can sleep in their own bed. So it's a little bit crazy, but and I know that not everyone has a nanny to be able to do that, or a friend who will. But interestingly, one of our employees will go help take care of the farm animals when Hugh and I are away, and helps out my mom. When we have our big events, our entire team goes and my mom goes, and that leaves nobody. So that's why we have this person from New Jersey who will come take care of the crowd. Is that the easiest way to get your animals taken care of? No. But before I found this person from New Jersey, I actually went into a Facebook group that I'm in that's a closed group of Cavalier lovers. And I put it to the group and I said, hey, if I have a week where we have to go away and I don't have somebody to care for our farm, is there anybody in this group? It's only like 300 people in the group. Is there anybody in this group who would be willing to come stay at the farm and take care of all the animals? You can bring your own dogs with you. Anybody willing to do that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the response was overwhelming. Everybody's like, oh my God, I would love to come stay at the farm and take care of the farm. I love donkeys. This will be so much fun.
I'm literally sitting in the chair going, can you add me to the list?
Yeah. So it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
So you never know who's out there that you could trade pet sitting with. I bought all the grooming equipment and so that I can groom my animals at home.
I would far rather have, people are always surprised when they hear me say this because I own a boarding facility, I own a grooming shop. I would rather you groom your own dog and have lopsided ears. Your dog does not care what your dog looks like. If your only choice is that you have to over vaccinate your dog to get him groomed, or you buy a clipper and you have lopsided ears every time, because you don't want to be that person that's like, well, I really wanted him to look beautiful all the time, but now he's dying from whatever, X, Y, and Z. And when it comes to boarding, it's kind of the same thing. If your only options for boarding are, I had a lady bring me her vaccine records of everything. This is an older woman who lived in a condo complex in Irvine, California. I didn't want to judge, but it didn't look like the type of person that was hiking in the mountains or anywhere where there would be rattlesnakes. But when I looked at her, she had the rattlesnake vaccine on her dog. And when I asked her about it, I said, why did you go hiking? We have a canyon called Peters Canyon. I said, you go hiking up in Peters Canyon? And she goes, oh, honey, I don't hike at all. I said, how come you got the rattles vaccine? She goes, I don't know. I just told the vet to give whatever he thought she needed. I didn't know what that meant. And she didn't actually know. She knew what a rattlesnake was. She wasn't that 80-year-old woman. She just never looked. She's like, why would he give her the rattlesnake vaccine? I'm like,
Wow.
when those are your only options, but it is scary. Sometimes it's really scary to have someone come into your home. Is it someone I can trust? Is it, sometimes people think, oh, the best thing is to do like a rover type thing. And I used to sit on the board of Joey's Legacy and we had calls from rovers. So there's the only perfect solution is you in your home. That's the only perfect solution. It sounds like you have something, grandma's great.
That's why we bought the RV originally.
Yeah.
I was like, well, then we can take the dogs with us when we travel.
Yeah. I mean, those are the perfect things.
But then we had to lie with that too, because a lot of the campgrounds have a limit. Like you can have 3 small dogs. I'm like, we have 5.
But one's really small.
Yeah. It was funny. We were at a campground where they had a limit. And so we set up our little pen and I would put out 1 black and tan, 1 ruby, and 1 Blenheim. And then I'd trade them out for a different black and tan and a different ruby. I was like, well, no, there's only 3 out there at a time. And then I looked out the window and somebody was walking along with 5 bloodhounds. I'm like,
oh, geez.
They got 5 big dogs. I'm good. It's fine. I'm letting all 5 dogs out. So sometimes they're not quite as strict as they say they are. It definitely can be an issue for people. So
well, on the flip side of that, we also have an enormous amount of dogs who have to be dragged out of their home to go home, out of our boarding facility to go home. So there's this whole long list of dogs who love coming to daycare. They absolutely love it. And if you're going to be out of town, it might be better if they're in that environment because they're occupied or, they're preoccupied, they're playing with their friends. If you're the type of person who travels, is planning on traveling, my biggest recommendation is start early with your dog, going to daycare, getting used to it, having those situations, build relationships with the same boarding facility. One of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody gets mad, and I'm guilty of this. I got mad at a nail lady one time and I never went back. It was really stupid because she knew exactly how I liked it, but such a long story. But when you get mad at somebody at a boarding facility or a grooming shop and you're just like, oh, last time I went, her ears were lopsided, so I'm going to another lady, right? Please understand that your animals build relationships like you build relationships. So when you get mad at the groomer who charged you an extra $5, and I'm not saying money isn't an issue, it should be at some point, but dragging your dog from grooming shop to boarding shop to grooming shop to boarding shop is so stressful on them. So if you're building relationships, build them with, if it's the house person that's taking care of the boarding facility, the grooming facility, wherever it is, start them young and get them used to it. And then you're going to have less stress on them. My hard no's are if that boarding facility isn't requiring a 2-week waiting period and they're serious about it, not just off the fly, well, we kind of like it if you wait 2 weeks. If they are not serious about it, I would never bring my dog there because that means kennel cough's in the air everywhere. And the chances are, especially if you have an old dog or a dog who might have cancer or a dog who's just got maybe an autoimmune disease and you're going to throw them into this environment where kennel cough is spreading everywhere, you're going to come home with a sick dog. When dogs are under stress, a lot of stuff comes out. So I also would never, like I said, ever bring my dog to a place that's allowing the topical stuff because I don't know if my dog's going to get it in his eye and rub up against it. So those are hard no's to me. Air purifiers are very important. We have them throughout my whole place. We have these air purifiers that are constantly going. So we have cameras. So if something ever was to go wrong, you can look at the camera. You have to be really careful with boarding facilities. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll put up a camera that faces this one little area and it's where it goes live. And so you get to watch it and you get to see that one little area, but you have no idea what's going on behind real life. So that's another issue you got to kind of ask, like, where are these cameras?
Yeah. And I always used to tell my clients, look, if you're thinking about boarding your pet, go visit the facility. And if they won't let you take a tour of the facility, that's pretty much a red flag.
It can be. It's hard. Just because the way my setup is. Like I had this guy one time, I used to own 2 boarding facilities and I closed one of them. But the one that I owned was right next to another boarding facility. It was on this weird street where they were all boarding facilities and mine was down at the end. And this guy would never let anybody go in the back where his boarding facility is, which if that was me, I wouldn't either because it was disgusting back there. I could see it over the fence. So he would never let anybody in. So I tested it with one of my really good clients one time. I said, hey, go next door and ask if you could do a tour. We're, mind you, in the same county, same city, same street. And he tells her that it's against the law for him to allow anybody to go in the back of the boarding facility. So she came over, of course, and she's like, he says it's against the law. And I'm like, what law is he making up? He doesn't want you back there. So a lot of times boarding facilities will say that my insurance doesn't cover. Now, I'm not going to talk on every insurance company out there because I don't know. But my insurance company, once I am insured, I'm insured for the property. You're only insured if somebody slips in the receptionist area. Right. I'm insured for the whole property. However, it's really difficult to take somebody all the way to the back into my store because you'd have to walk into the dog area and I don't want someone getting bit. Some of those dogs come every day and they are very protective of their area. I can't even go back there if I'm not in uniform. That's how weird it is. Like if I go in there on off day, I have dogs come running at me like I'm a stranger and they're like I'm like, listen, it's me. I have to tell them. So, but we will let people go to a certain point and they can look over the door and they can see and they can smell and we're not a huge facility so they can see some. But you're right. If they're like, oh, absolutely not, my insurance won't cover it, I would ask what insurance company they have because you should be able to see what's going on.
I can understand that, they can't be taking people on tours all day, every day. It's like they have work to do, but they could say to you, well, we're kind of busy right now. Let's schedule a time for you to come. We'll show you. That would be fair. Or we have cameras set up throughout the facility. We can show you footage of what the back area looks like.
We have a camera up in the front and it has all of the areas. Yeah. So anybody walking in can see what's going on.
I think that absolutely ask a lot of questions, really just consider your own pet's safety. What do you want for your specific pet? Like I know that my animals are not going to fulfill the vaccine and flea and tick chemical requirements of a lot of boarding facilities, so they're not going anywhere. I mean, mine are even I've got a couple that are even a little funny about who gets to come in the house. So, makes it a little tricky. And last thing I want is to drop my kids off for boarding somewhere and then they bite somebody. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to have to deal with that. So it would not be a good environment. You got to look at every pet as an individual, do what's best for you, for your pet, look at your lifestyle, their lifestyle. That's why a lot of people get RVs and travel that way because they can take their pets with them. Another whole podcast about how to keep them safe in RVs.
Maybe I'm going to need to talk to you about that. My husband's got 4 cats and now we're getting an RV apparently.
Oh, how cool. Well, Yeah, that's another whole thing. But I will say that traveling with our pets was one of the most fun things that we ever did.
Oh, I can't wait. We're probably going to do that.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for your
absolutely.
expertise. And, anybody who does get to use our boarding and grooming facility, I think you're kind of lucky.
Thanks.
Southern California.
Yep. That's where we are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Palmitoyl ethanolamide, also known as PEA, I started using it with my own Cavaliers, and I was so impressed by the results that I decided to make human-grade, high-quality PEA available for other pets. After successfully using Dr. Judy's PEA on cats, dogs, horses, and donkeys, it continues to be one of my favorite tools to have in my toolbox. Take 15% off any size of Dr. Judy's PEA using code YTP15 at naturallyhealthypets.com. That's YTP15 for 15% off any size of Dr. Judy's PEA at naturallyhealthypets.com.